Yeah, so now that brings me to my next question, which you described Mark Benioff as this, somewhat benevolent CEO who has, at least on the surface, take some positions in which he seems to care about his stakeholders, and there is this concept called stakeholder capitalism.
Right.
Explain what that is.
Well, stakeholder capitalism is this term that goes back to the 70s. It was first trotted out by Klaus Schwab, who's the founder of the World Economic Forum. And it essentially meant, instead of just engaging in Milton Friedman-like maximizing of shareholder value and assuming that all good would flow from that, let's cater to stakeholders. Let's have there be partnerships between the public sector and the private sector. Who could object to that? That's all perfectly reasonable. Well, in recent years, it's become the go-to move for Davos Man in trying to preemptively fend off things like progressive taxation and regulation. So Benioff and Larry Fink have been the loudest on stakeholder capitalism, but it was under Jamie Dimon when he was running the Business Roundtable in the summer of 2019. They trotted out this new statement of a purpose of a corporation and explicitly said, Milton Friedman is the past. Now we're focused on catering to stakeholders like labor, local communities, the environment.
What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that?
Well, nothing's wrong with that if it were real. I mean, Mark Benioff went on Jim Cramer's show, Mad TV, and or whatever that show is called, and said, well, Jim, the planet is a stakeholder. Well, that's very comforting to those of us who live on the planet. Look, we've had a test of these principles. 181 CEOs signed this statement of a purpose of a corporation. Precisely one of them actually went and got board approval that we know of. That's Jamie Dimon himself. How real could this be if these CEOs don't bother to go to their boards to get approval? Moreover, a bunch of independent studies have been done showing that the companies that sign that pledge have actually performed worse on a bunch of metrics around workplace safety, policies for work-life balance, compensation for people who are sick, et cetera. They've performed worse than the companies that didn't sign the pledge at all. And guess who signed the pledge? Jeff Bezos signed the pledge. Albert Bourla, the CEO of Pfizer, signed the pledge. Pfizer then takes COVID vaccines that are created on the back of publicly financed research, sells them to the highest bidder around the world, makes a token show of taking a couple million doses to distribute to the rest of the planet through COVAX, this stakeholder capitalism like a bit of photo op philanthropy. And the result is, if you live in a country whose government can pay whatever Pfizer wants for vaccines, you get protection. And meanwhile, we got doctors in South Asia and parts of Africa who are treating COVID patients with no protection whatsoever. And not only is that a humanitarian catastrophe, I mean, we should be outraged about that. This is our money that paid for a lot of this research. For selfish reasons, those of us in wealthy countries are effectively subsidizing Albert Bourla and his shareholders through a pandemic that has gone on longer. I mean, the result of unequal vaccine distribution, I was writing this, 18 months ago, along with a lot of other people. We invited variants. This is how we got Delta and Omicron. We didn't protect the rest of the world. We protected ourselves in the wealthy world. And so now, even in places like New York City and Los Angeles and London, we are effectively subsidizing monopoly profits for people like Albert Bourla, despite his signing of this pledge of stakeholder capitalism, through the perpetuation of the pandemic, the disruption of our kids' education, if we're parents dealing with kids stuck at home on distance learning, fear, threats to livelihood. I mean, we've had a test of stakeholder capitalism, and it's an abject failure. And moreover, it still has currency for PR value. It is Davos Man saying, I've got this. You don't have to regulate me. You don't have to tax me, so government can take care of the problems that I actually never will take care of. We need to disabuse ourselves of the notion that we can outsource our problems to billionaires.